I'm going to talk about some useful how to draw books that I own. These are the books that I find to be the most valuable for someone who is learning how to draw, at least they were for me, and I still refer to them frequently if there's something that I need to know. I'm assuming that a lot of you who are watching this video are self-taught. You have been teaching yourself how to draw, and the internet, what you find online, is likely your main source of information, and there's a lot of it out there. Now this can be quite overwhelming, especially for a beginner who is learning how to draw. They have to filter through all of this information and hope that they are heading in the right direction. Whilst the internet is a very convenient resource for learning new things, it can be quite unstructured. There's everything everywhere, which isn't very practical for a beginner who is teaching themselves. A better alternative would be to use books, and there are many how to draw books out there covering various subjects. These are often tailored towards teaching a beginner to draw from the ground up, allowing an artist to gradually work through them and practice at their own pace. So I am going to list all of the drawing books that I find the most valuable and talk about why. Now it's important to understand that these books are each for different subjects involved in drawing. I've discussed the art fundamentals in the past, and these books tend to specifically cover one of those fundamentals, and so I'll place the subject underneath the title of the book. I realised when I was making this video that I recommended using books as opposed to the internet. Then I realised that I am part of the internet. I suppose you could consider me to be somewhat of an online resource for learning how to draw, seeing as I make videos on the subject, so there's some exceptions. Anyways, let's talk about these books. Perspective Made Easy by Ernest Norling is the oldest book that I have in this list, originally published in 1939. Now just because the book is dated doesn't mean the information inside is no longer relevant. Perspective Made Easy has stood against the test of time. The title holds a lot of truth because throughout its pages, Ernest Norling explains the laws of perspective in a step-by-step fashion, making it an accessible and easy to follow book for anyone who is interested in learning such an important fundamental. This was the book that led me through every important concept in regards to perspective when I was learning how to draw. Each example is illustrated with clear annotations. It doesn't just throw a load of information in your face as soon as you open the book. Instead, it starts with the absolute basics and gradually progresses into the more complex areas. In addition to the easy to read examples, there is a section at the end of each step that summarises the important parts you should remember, along with some exercises that you can put into practice. Although this book is an excellent starting point for any beginner who is new to perspective drawing, an artist who wants to delve into the more technical aspects of the subject will need to look elsewhere. Perhaps this next book will be more to your liking. How to Draw by Scott Robertson is one of those books that I find myself going back to frequently. This is likely down to the amount of information covered in this book that is hard to find anywhere else. It also takes some practice to wrap your head around some of the techniques and methods presented throughout its pages. It jumps right into the technicalities surrounding perspective drawing, covering many areas of the subject that other perspective drawing books never really cover, or at least not in as much detail as this book. I had a pretty good understanding of perspective when I first purchased this book. I went into it thinking that only some of its content would be new to me, but to my surprise, the majority of what's covered in this book was new to me. There's chapters covering the cone of vision, grids, lenses. All of these terms and techniques were introduced to me as I worked my way through this book. Whilst I wouldn't recommend this book to a beginner who wants to learn the basics of perspective, it's definitely one that I would suggest purchasing if you are looking to learn some advanced techniques. It's useful to artists, architects, and designers who want to learn how to accurately draw objects and environments from their imagination. When I put what I learned from this book to use, I am often drawing with rulers, protractors, and other instruments. If what is presented on the pages wasn't enough, then there is also some supporting video content that can be accessed through downloading an image recognition app and scanning the play button icons that are present on many of the pages. This will take you to the step-by-step videos where Scott Robertson himself puts the techniques explained into practice. It's fair to say that there is a vast amount of content here, and it has personally expanded my understanding of perspective when it comes to drawing. Moving on from perspective to anatomy, we have Michael Hampton's Figure Drawing, Design and Invention. Now when it comes to anatomy, I'll be honest, I need all the help that I can get. I find it pretty challenging, especially when it comes to drawing figures from imagination. Although we are discussing books here, there are some great resources out there online that acknowledges the complexity of anatomy when it comes to drawing. A good example is Proko. His videos on the subject are very accessible and easy to follow. I was looking online and doing some research, trying to find a book which also presented anatomy in a similar fashion. I wanted something that applied to artists and that walked you through what was involved in the subject. I found that a lot of books would just present information to you, without really making an effort to show how you can apply it to your drawings. After reading some positive reviews and seeing the book recommended by many other artists, I decided to purchase Figure Drawing, Design and Invention. Now this book was what I found most practical when it comes to learning anatomy. Not only does it introduce you to figure drawing in general, it takes its time to cover everything involved when it comes to designing and inventing figures from imagination. There is a lot of content in this book presented to you in a linear fashion, starting with gesture drawing, covering the basics before moving into the structure and surface anatomy of the human body. It places a lot of emphasis on the gesture and volumes that are necessary to represent the various muscles on the body. What I find most useful is the colour coding, where you'll often see the muscles being discussed in isolation and then shown in action with the rest of the body. The annotation remains simple and to the point and is usually complemented with convenient diagrams that illustrate what is important. There is no shortage of examples in this book when it comes to seeing how the information is put into practice. It covers anatomy in a way that is suitable for any artist looking to improve, and it's a great companion for anyone interested in life drawing. In addition to this book, Framed Ink, I would also like to bring some attention to two more books by the same author titled Framed Perspective 1 and 2. Whilst I'm not going to cover these books in this video, they still deserve a mention because they are also useful when it comes to learning perspective. Marcus Matteo Mastri is a visual concept, traditional animation and graphic novel artist. If you also have an interest in those areas, then his books may be better suited for you and your purposes. There is a lot of fundamental concepts presented throughout them. When it comes to perspective, you can learn a lot about it, and you can also see how it is used in regards to visual storytelling. Now Framed Ink is no exception. It explains concepts in composition, layout, all of the elements involved in successful visual storytelling. I had been in two minds about purchasing this book for a while. Whilst I'm not necessarily interested in producing comics or graphic novels, I hoped that I would find a lot of information and examples surrounding composition, and I wasn't disappointed. There are many illustrations throughout this book, accompanied with annotation that breaks down the image's intentions. You start to understand why the artist made such decisions when composing a scene. It's a great reference for anyone interested in telling a story through visual imagery. This doesn't just apply to those illustrating the panels for a comic though, it's also an important factor when creating single images. You will always be dealing with composition when you create artwork. There might not be much emphasis placed on a narrative, but you still want your image to be visually appealing. As an artist, you are responsible for the resulting image, very much like a director of a movie, except we are in control of everything. This book will show you how to compose images with a purpose. If you have a narrative that you are trying to communicate visually, then this book is a great resource that will assist you in doing that. I wouldn't consider myself an artist who is experienced when it comes to using colour, but I do own a book on the subject, Colour and Light by James Gurney. I had picked up this book after telling myself that I should start to delve into some colour theory, so I did some research, and it didn't take me long to come across this book. A lot of artists recommended this one, and for good reason. There is a lot of content here. I am in the process of reading through this, and what I find enjoyable is I find myself reading this before I go to sleep. Now, I know that I said you can't just read about drawing and expect to improve. You have to apply what you learn, and normally when you are working through a how to draw book, you have it on the desk next to you and you are practicing that way. But with this, it's written in a way where you can just read through it and admire the illustrations. It's fascinating to learn everything that is considered with each painting, and every time you turn the page, you are presented with a different factor involved when dealing with colour and light. It makes an effort to answer questions and explain the reasoning behind everything. Why does something appear that way? It's a lot more useful for an artist to understand why they are doing something as opposed to just mindlessly following step-by-step instructions. The book will set you up with the necessary knowledge that is required when approaching these different situations. How do you deal with different types of light? How should you select your colours and why? Everything is explained through the annotation, and the author exemplifies his writing with his artwork. There is so much information here that it can at times be overwhelming, but colour and light can be a complicated subject, and if any book is successful in its attempt to explain it, then it's going to be this one. So those are some books that I found to be very helpful in my pursuit in learning how to draw, and there's a lot of how to draw books out there. There's probably some that I should have heard of, or you might suggest some to me, so leave them down in the comments down below. I'll read through them, and other people who are also learning how to draw can have a look and see what they want to check out themselves as well. But with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please leave a like, subscribe with the notifications on to always stay up to date and never miss an upload in the future. If you want to support the channel further, then do consider checking out the Patreon page where I create some exclusive content. With that being said, thank you for watching this video. I'll see you in the next one.